Why do good Christian parents end up with prodigal kids? Are you a parent of a prodigal? Have you struggled with wondering what you've done wrong, or if you've somehow failed your child? If so, what you're about to hear might surprise you. This is the Counterculture Mom Show. I'm your host, Tina Griffin, and we're going to dive deep into the topic of parenting. How do we parent these kids? To help us stay sane, I'm with psychologist, author, Dr. Doug Weiss. Dr. Doug, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Tina. Thanks for doing the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. Now, Dr. Doug, you've been on Dr. Phil, Oprah, Good Morning America, The Doctors, and other national television shows. You obviously know what you're talking about. Do you help a lot of parents ring in and bring back home their prodigal kids?
Well, you know, they're everywhere. Every church, pastors, ministry leaders, you're not inoculated from being, when you're a Christian, to have children that choose a path of being a prodigal.
Is there hope? I don't want a prodigal child. I've got 4 kids, 13 and under. Please tell me there's hope.
Now, Tina, you're a mom. And as a Christian mom, you have this idea that if I'm a good parent, I'm guaranteed results. Now, the problem with that thinking is that God's word doesn't allow it when it comes to parenting, because he gives free will to each one of those little beings that you decide to bring into the world. And each little being gets to decide their own path. You can be a perfect parent and end up with someone in prison. You could be an imperfect parent, a disgusting parent, someone who goes to prison, and end up with a preacher as a son or a daughter. Okay? There are no guaranteed outcomes in parenting. And that's the sad biblical truth. Okay? God himself was a prodigal with his first 2 kids.
Wow.
He was a prodigal parent. And that's why the prodigal parent is so much part of the biblical narrative. It's from the garden, when perfect parent, perfect food, perfect environment, perfect circumstances, only one law.
Don't touch.
Right?
Don't touch.
Don't eat this thing. The rest of it's all yours, okay? And he still became a prodigal parent. Now, if that's possible for the God of heaven and earth, then any of us take that risk when we bring children into the world. And that's part of experiencing what that's like. You know, God brought his children into the world, made a perfect house and food, took care of them, did everything right, showed up every day, quality time, nurtured them, celebrated them, all that stuff. And they still chose to walk away. So I'm sorry, Tina, you have statistically a chance of having one or more. I hope not. I pray not. I don't want that for anyone. But the parent prodigal process, if someone hits that place, is perfect for them to understand that they're not responsible, that their grief is normal, their hurt is normal, their anger is normal, and how not to sabotage their marriage because of it, how not to sabotage the other kids because of it. And this is real stuff, you know, Tina. Moms and dads suffer tremendously by the millions with prodigals. You know, the statistics on children leaving the church are astronomical. Well, each one of those statistics is a name and a mom and a dad attached to it, and a sister and brother. And it hurts like really bad when you have a prodigal in your life. It's like having an addict in your life.
Dr. Doug, you are right on. Now, you're a licensed psychologist. You've written dozens of books on marriage, parenting, self-worth, sexual purity, and intimacy and relationships. I just want you to copy your brain and give me a copy of your brain, because then I will hopefully have all the knowledge I need to not have a prodigal. But I hear what you're saying.
You keep going down that road of you want a guaranteed outcome. Okay,
No.
God had infinite wisdom, and he got a sucky outcome. So it's not a matter of wisdom. It's not a matter of love. He is love. See, you have the normal Christian belief. If I'm a good mom, I get these results. And the word of God does not promise that, because the prodigal process, I'm going to educate you right now. In Romans chapter 1, the prodigal process is outlined. Number 1, they do not glorify God as God. And these could be kids going to Sunday school and like, you know what? God's not my God. That's a heart thing that you can't see. They're not thankful is a real characteristic. Number 2, their thinking gets weird. You know, their heart becomes dark. And then they start getting into idolatry and immorality. That is the prodigal process. Now, what's interesting in Romans 1 is the parent is never mentioned.
This is like a private session you're giving me right now. I'm like in your office, but millions are watching. Yikes. Shame on me for still going back down the rabbit hole. You think that if you've done everything you can, that's not going to happen to your kids. The sad thing is when you said one of my kids, or hopefully not one, but if one is, I already have in my head which kid that would be. That's not good. Okay.
It's usually the one like you. Yeah. So,
It's usually, what did you say? It's usually the one that's just like me.
right.
I know. And it's exactly the kid that I have in my mind right now that's so not good. Okay. And I don't feel like I was the prodigal. I went from a dairy farm in Wisconsin to Hollywood. But, luckily I didn't become like a prodigal, but still, we all have our things we're working on. So, Dr. Doug, what inspired you to write this Prodigal Parent Process book?
Well, Pastor Chris Hodges sent me one of the pastors in his huge organization who had a radical prodigal. And this couple was carrying that burden so heavy. They had like an 8,000 member church, but they were about ready to just burn out.
Oh.
They've been carrying this kid for probably 8 years. And he was doing all kinds of drugs and sexual inappropriate behaviors and just a disaster. And they came here for 5 days. And, I worked for the last 30 years with sex addicts and partners of betrayal trauma. So I'm used to dealing with the partner who's been traumatized. Well, these principles apply to the prodigal parent as well. And they were able to do some anger, grief, has set new boundaries, stop blaming each other, not take responsibility. When I showed them the Bible, like I just shared with you as a mom, there's no room for you to have guilt. There's no room for that.
Wow.
You either believe the word of God that the prodigal process is an individual process, or you make up a story that's not biblical, that somehow you made this happen. I can tell you kids that have been beaten. Now I've been counseling for over 35 years, Tina. Okay. I have counseled hundreds and hundreds of men and women who've been beaten, abused, neglected, sexually raped by their mom or dad continually for years, and they still love Jesus and they're Christian leaders. Well, how does that happen? The same way it happens for good parents to end up with a prodigal. It's called free will.
Wow. Okay, give us a testimony or two of someone who has gone through your book, Prodigal Parent Process, and came out the other end with a happy ending story, how this amazing knowledge helped.
You're looking for outcome. I keep hearing that from your heart.
Gosh, I'm getting a D
outcome.
minus today.
Stop that.
Okay.
There's no outcome. Now, I can tell you there's a Pastor Dean Hawk, a friend of mine here in town. I gave him a copy of the book. He had some prodigals. He ended up buying hundreds of copies of this book for his church because he wanted them to understand they're not responsible. They're not responsible. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be angry. You cannot control the outcome of your children. This is so ingrained in some women and some men that somehow, I'm Dr. Weiss and I'm going to have a perfect kid. I got great kids. They're not perfect, but you know what I'm saying? You can't. There is no place about you that makes them make that choice. They have to make that choice individually.
Okay, I'm getting that. Maybe I should rephrase a question. How will this, because I just got this baby in the mail and I'm going to be soaking it up, how will this Prodigal Parent Process book and workbook help me?
Sure. Now, if you have a prodigal,
okay,
so you and your husband can go through the DVD or book and the workbook, and you can start processing the truth about having a prodigal, that it's not your fault, that you can have anger, how to have boundaries, how to create a team, because you can't do this by yourself, and how not to damage your marriage, how to help your kids go through the process. It's about going through the process. It's not about making my prodigal not a prodigal. You can't do that.
I am understanding what you're saying. I am getting this. Your words are working quickly. Okay.
Good.
We'll come back.
It's like if you have an alcoholic husband, all of a sudden he goes off the beam and he becomes an alcoholic. You didn't do that. You didn't cause it, and you can't cure it. You are powerless over his choices. Okay. In the same way, you're powerless over your kids' choices. Now, I know as a mom, that is not the message you want to hear. Okay. I'm sorry. The truth hurts, but you don't have the power you think you do. You can love extremely well and still have great results that have nothing to do with you and bad results that have nothing to do with you.
I am absolutely learning as we go on this episode. I am starting to understand what you're saying. And you know what's hard for me? I am used to having control, being in control, and I don't want to be controlling.
How sad is that? Because I'm going to tell you a secret. It doesn't exist.
Well, I should go a little more in detail because I know we're new here. But I mean, like control of what I can control, like the ministry, what we're working out. Yes, exactly,
Sure.
myself. So it's hard to. You want the best for your kids, and it's hard to, not have control over them, but I am understanding what you're saying. Okay, this is eye-opening. When we come back, we're going to talk about these prodigal children and how to bring them home. Hopefully, might not always happen according to what you just said. Right after a word from our sponsor.
We are in a cancel culture. Is your money safe? Are you holding it in a place that shares your conservative Christian values? If your funds are not with a financial institution that shares your values, they may be in jeopardy if you are not in agreement with their secular values. American Christians could lose billions of charitable donations without even knowing it. Capstone Legacy Foundation's charter ensures that we follow donor intent. Please go to capstonelegacy.org to help us see if you need to change where you are holding your assets for planned giving. That's capstonelegacy.org.
All right, Dr. Doug. First of all, I got to just dig in deep here. I know people are probably thinking, why do good Christian parents even have prodigals?
Well, the reason is because free will. God gave man, this is the biggest gift in all eternity. He never gave free will to anyone. The first few words he spoke to Adam is, you are free. Those are the first 3 words Adam heard from his father. You are free. You're free to reject me. You're free to love me. You're free to walk with me. You're free to walk away from me. You are free. That free will throws out all the laws of cause and effect.
So
okay?
That's
So there is
why,
no cause and effect in parenting because of free will. Now, because of free will, they can choose, and you set the right environment, you give them the best choices possible, but they still can choose to say no because, how many people have said no to Jesus? So many, even after knowing him. Okay, it's a free will process. So that's why bad parents can have great Christian kids and great Christian families can have a radical drug dealing prodigal.
okay, how many kids do you have?
2.
Are either one of them prodigals?
There was a little waving, going, but no. I have one that's never done anything and one that's kind of, waved his way through some stuff, but he's fine. But I have raised thousands of prodigals in counseling, thousands, because I'm a psychologist. I deal with sexual addiction primarily and intimacy and anorexia. Those are the things we deal with.
Wow.
And so these people have crashed and burned, right? Because they're at the end of the prodigal process. They've gone into immorality, they've gone into idolatry, and they've crashed, and then they come home to the Father. When you read in the book, I spend the first several chapters explaining the actual prodigal process. Okay, God, in the prodigal son story, first there was a famine in the land. International influence to get this kid home. Then this kid, he ends up with the job, bad job, all this kind of stuff. He ends out no money. The circumstances God creates around this kid for the kid to make the choice. Now, remember, when the kid made the choice, he was in a far off country.
Right.
He wasn't next door. So the transformation of walking home and trusting God for food and shelter and safety day after day changed his heart. By the time he got to the driveway, which is what the father ran down, the father didn't run 100 miles. The kid walked 100 miles, or at least, okay? So he was changed by the time he came home. He trusted the father. And oftentimes parents are not the person who brings back the prodigal. Now, I've worked with thousands of prodigals.
Good.
Thousands of prodigals. And I can't think of one that told me my mom or dad brought me back to Christ. It was some random person at a bar. It was some random person witnessing to them. It was some person at work. It was a girlfriend that took them to church. It was some kind of other set. Now, what you do is you pray. God, create the circumstances. Loose your angels to send them the messengers that they can hear the gospel. And you pray and you intercede, but you cannot control outcome. And do not believe that you're going to be that person that's I'm going to bring them back. No, you're probably not. Okay. And what can happen is you can damage your relationship if you believe that. Listen, I'm going to love you. If this is where you're at, I'm going to love you. And I'm going to love you when you come back because I believe in God's going to bring you back, but I'm not going to fuss with you about it. I'm not going to fuss with you about it. You know inside your heart what the truth is, don't you? Yes, ma'am. They do because the Holy Spirit's in them.
Yes,
He's the one convicting. He's the one going, no, that's stupid. Don't do that. And he's yelling and screaming at them. And then they have all these bizarre circumstances that happen, consequences and all kinds of their life. And they end up coming back home. Do you know how many kids came home because of COVID?
Oh, so many.
Right. And you know how many had to go back to church because to come home was to go back to church?
So many.
God will touch, he will use whatever he can to bring that prodigal, because it's a prodigal to him. It's not a prodigal just to you. They're not your prodigals. They're his prodigals. You
Yes.
have to be the parents of his prodigal.
I love
And
this.
you let him be the father who can do the things that need to happen to bring that kid back.
Wow, I'm getting the 1-2 punch from you today. This is fantastic. Okay, so the next question I have is this. Let's say there's parents out there, their prodigal came home, but they're still a prodigal, or the prodigal child is still underneath the roof. How do you
That's
love
a
your
tough one.
kids, even though they have free will, but not get to the point where you're accepting of their behavior? You know what I'm saying? Where you're still loving them, but by not loving too, how do I say that? Loving too
Yes.
much to not show that you're accepting of it. I don't, there's a lot of that going on.
No, and that's a very confusing place. And this is why I recommend in the parent prodigal process that every church, and if you have a prodigal, you are a candidate to start a group. Start a group in every church. 30 to 50% have prodigals. You start that group and you make a safe place in your home or in your Sunday school area, and you get eight couples together.
Ooh.
Now you bring up the subject. Hey, my daughter wants $1,000 for this. Let the group talk to you about whether you should or not, because your husband's going to say no, and you're going to say yes, and now the marriage is going to be in conflict. So you know what? Let's bring this up to our group, and if the group thinks we should give her $1,000, but what can happen is, you know what? I'm going to give that $1,000 to Charlie and Mary. Charlie and Mary are going to give them that $1,000, and then they're going to have to pay Charlie and Mary back. And now Charlie and Mary have a voice into that kid's life that they didn't have. Where if I give it to them, they're not going to listen to me anyway because they take me for granted. But they're going to have to respect them because it's their money. Now, see, now we can start raising that prodigal. Now we can start speaking into this voice. Now we can build a community around this kid that's not just mom and dad, and we're so ashamed we can't tell anybody. We're so in secrecy that we're going to, get him out of jail secretly. No, let Jane and Charlie get him out of jail. Let them stay at their house for a week or two.
I love how you think. You are crafty. You're a doctor for a reason. Very, very good advice. Okay, can you explain? I know that your book is loaded with this, but let's say there is strife within the marriage because they have a child that is doing this. What are some quick pointers you can give right now to people watching saying, yes, our marriage is crumbling because Johnny just won't listen?
Well, there's a couple things. So in the book, I talk about make sure that you're dating, getting time alone, having fun. Make sure that you're praying together, not about Johnny, praying together in general, sharing feelings every day, 2 feelings a day, so you're processing your emotions so that you're not just puking on each other. Give each other 2 praises so you stay in a place of gratitude for your spouse. Have sex consistently. Keep your structures stable. What happens is your structures dissolve, your marriage can dissolve, okay? Keep your structures sound, and then get in a group for Johnny. You're like this. It's like being a parent of an alcoholic, or being a parent of a sex addict, or a drug addict. Get in a group. Trust the group process of, hey, this is what's going on. Before me and Mary explode about this, let's bring it to our group and say, hey, our kid wants us to pay, their car payment. What? How old are they? They're 32. Okay. They're 32. They can pay their own car payment, or they can just be repossessed, right? But see, when someone else says that, especially like if it's a woman across the the room and says to you as a mom, "Don't you dare pay that." That's different than your husband being a jerk for saying exactly the same thing.
Okay, you are. I really love you. I love what you are saying right now. I love the information. Very good. We can't enable our kids either. I totally get what you're saying there. Okay, so you gave like 10 great tips there for parents. How about the siblings? I think it's a very important angle that you address. There's sibling rivalry. What happens in a family if there's a prodigal and the other kids are in the mix?
Well, the one thing that parents are not able to see is that the brother or sister is having a double prodigal crisis. First of all, they're living in the shadow and the shame of their brother or sister, and they have to keep constantly fighting that they're not them.
Oh.
Okay. Secondly, they have to watch you as mom cry and dad go walk off the anger that you feel.
Oh.
They get to see the prodigal lie about you and names and use you, and they're hurt and they're angry. Now, sibling love is not unconditional like parental love. And you raised your kids to hang around people that are good for them, and this kid is not good for them.
Wow.
And so this kid has incorporated your values. Okay? Now, the best thing to do, even if a prodigal comes back, don't go down the road. If you need to forgive, you need to forgive. No, you don't. Take your time, feel the hurt, feel the anger, because your son and daughter is going to be a little smarter than you. You notice that it wasn't the brother that ran down the hill and gave him a robe and a ring. Okay? It was the dad. The brother's like, you know what? I'm going to wait and see, because I've been doing double work for this guy for the last year while he's been out drinking and using prostitutes. Okay? He was a jerk when he was here before. I don't know that he's going to follow through. I don't know if he's just not using you again, Dad, to come back and get more money. I'm going to wait and see. Let your kids have some months, maybe even a year, to evaluate this person's life. And then, okay, talk about, but let them go through the process. Do not push hard. Otherwise, you could lose the good kid, because you're asking for them to do something that's not sane.
Unreal. All right, you've got my mind just blown right now. You're dropping bombs left and right today. More on the Prodigal Parent Process resources right after a word from our sponsor. Anxiety is at an all-time high, causing restlessness and paralyzing panic attacks. There is hope, a revolutionary product that brings healing and relieves symptoms of anxiety by harnessing the body's own electrical fields in conjunction with a pre-programmed patch. The Restore Patch is an all-natural, drug-free, wearable patch, and it's risk-free with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Check out restorepatch.com and get 10% off using promo code TINA at checkout. Stop feeling overwhelmed, fearful, and anxious with Restore Patch. Have you had marriages that were on the rocks that came in and that were repaired and mended by your counseling?
Oh, thousands of couples have come to Heart to Heart Counseling Center who've experienced sexual addiction, betrayal, infidelity, intimacy, anorexia, where there's no intimacy or sexuality going on in the marriage. And they've lived happily ever after, thousands. That's what we do. We repair marriages all the time. And so that's easy.
Can people come from around the country to come to your counseling sessions?
We have people from all over the world, all over the country, who come do 5-day intensives here or 3 days, but we also have telephone counseling with people all over the globe. So the issues we deal with are international. And so we have international counseling center where people, they're in different groups and phone counseling from all over, probably every continent.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to be digging into more of your research here right after we get done with this program. Head over to the Prodigal Parent Process website to get all kinds of free resources and order Doug's book, The Prodigal Parent Process, along with the companion DVD and workbook. You've got it all. You thought about all this. It's fantastic. And right now, Dr. Doug, we need your information really bad with the state of our culture around this globe right now. All the pressures on marriages, job issues, kids now coming home, like you said, that might be prodigal children. On your website, Prodigal Parent Process, what can people find for resources?
Well, they're gonna be able to find the things you mentioned, the book, the DVD, the workbook. They're also going to be able to find the Facebook place, because that's maybe a place where you can start talking about it. You need a place to talk about it. And then they can also talk to their pastor about seeing if they can start a group, or if he knows someone who's been through this, who's willing to start a group. The community part of this process is the most powerful part. When we can have a place to let someone carry this burden with us. Carrying our burdens alone can destroy you, but when you share it with someone else, they're not as devastated as you think, okay? And they probably have a prodigal themselves. This is epidemic, and the church has nothing for these parents. And they oftentimes leave the church because they're ashamed. And if we say, this is not your fault, come on in here, we're gonna love you through this, we're gonna pray through this with you, we're gonna actually get involved. The church will give the money to the kid, and the kid's going to be responsible to the church for this.
I never really put this much thought into prodigal children, but when I think of prodigal children, I don't anymore, but I used to think, what did that parent do wrong? That is what I thought. I never thought anything of what you just dropped, you just dropped in my head today. This is blowing my mind, but it makes complete sense. Thank you for waking me up here today on my own program, the Counterculture Mom Show. It's just been unbelievable. Everybody, you have to follow Doug. Go to his website, prodigalparentprocess.com. Check out his Facebook page. Once again, Doug Weiss. All these links will be surrounding this episode at counterculturemom.com. If you're tuning in via audio, radio program here, podcast, you got to watch it. Watch it for the dirt and to get a lot more information. Thank you so much, Dr. Doug, for jumping on the program. Let's keep praying for our prodigal kids and raising our children with God's guidance.